Hey guys, I'm Karlyn Borysenko with Decode the Left. I have been an analyst and an independent journalist covering the far left for about 4 years now, and many of you, many thousands of you, have just found my work for the first time, and I'm really excited, honestly. I've gained thousands more followers on Twitter, thousands more subscribers on YouTube this week. Now listen, of course, it's chaos and insanity that brought you to my channel, and you're looking for answers about the far left, so maybe that's not so good, but I am actually really thrilled that my work has been introduced to so many more people this week, and because of that, a lot of you have asked me, Karlyn, how did you get into doing this? Or maybe some of you remember me as the knitting Democrat from 2020 who left the left, and believe me, a lot of things have changed since then. If you were a person that subscribed to my channel in 2020, you've missed a lot. There's a lot to catch up on. But the biggest question I've been getting from everyone, regardless of if you knew me in the before times or you've been following me more recently, how did you get started doing this? How did you become a person that was documenting the far left basically every day of your life for 4 years? Well, I didn't plan this. This was not part of my life plan. This was not part of my life goal. You know, to really tell the story, we have to go back to 2020, don't we? Because I never wanted to be a public person on the internet. And so we're really going to go back into the pre-YouTube days to explain how I got from being a respectable organizational psychologist that was writing books about mindfulness and stress relief in the workplace and doing corporate training and perfectly happy with my life, by the way. I loved being an industrial organizational psychologist. For people who don't know, I do have a PhD in psychology. Industrial organizational psychology is my specialty. I'm really effing good at it. And honestly, part of why I'm so good at analyzing the left is because I have the industrial organizational psychology background. I used to go into businesses and be one of those people who would analyze the psychology of your teams and do trainings and presentations about communication styles and that sort of thing. I am really effing good at this. I was an organizational coach, performance coach, executive coach, all of these things. And then in around 2019, I was a Democrat my entire life. I grew up in Vermont. I'd always voted Democrat. It never crossed my mind to vote for Republicans. I hated Republicans. I was never a far leftist. Even though I grew up in Vermont, I voted for Bernie Sanders in every election. I could vote for Bernie Sanders until I moved to the state of New Hampshire. I was perfectly happy on the left. I really didn't have any questions. And then social justice took over my knitting community. This is how I got thrown into the public spotlight. And basically, I started questioning. This is one of those times like back in 2019 where people were doing all of these virtue signals on like Instagram and stuff like that. And so all of a sudden, all this far leftist stuff was coming into my Instagram and all of my friends were telling me I needed to do anti-racist training. And I was like, what the hell even is that? I'm in corporate training and I don't know what this is. And so there were all these demands being made on me. And I basically started to look around at my friends who were all Democrats and I went, you guys are all crazy. Like, what is going on? This doesn't even make sense. And so I started challenging myself to listening to voices who I thought I could disagree with. And this is really the story, the arc of my true kind of like internet journey, is that I'm the person that challenges myself to listen to people I think I'm going to disagree with. And sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, but I literally spend all my time basically listening to people who I disagree with, not to be convinced by them, but in order to understand how different groups on the internet see the world. So I started listening to all these conservative commentators, just like really kind of con Inc. guys now. It's like, now I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, I listened to Ben Shapiro and I found out Ben Shapiro wasn't insane. Today I look at Ben Shapiro and I'm like, he is insane for exactly the opposite reasons. So I'm a little embarrassed of the people I listened to when I first started waking up, so you'll have to forgive me for those. But it was like the basic con Inc. people. It was like Walk Away. I did stuff with the Walk Away campaign in 2020. It was like Dave Rubin. I was on his show a lot, and like really boring people now who I'm like, Karlyn, why did you listen to these people? Yeah, I did a PragerU video back in the day. Yeah, PragerU threw me under the bus. I don't want to talk about that right now, but that's whatever. We might get into that later. Anyway, so I had this whole arc of, I wrote an article on the internet talking about I'm questioning things on the left. I suddenly got thrown into the conservative media bubble. I never expected that to happen. It was never my goal to be famous on the internet. That was never something that was in my life plan. But when I got thrown into the conservative media and political bubble, and that's when a lot of my follower growth really happened, was back in 2020, I started A, being able to see inside just like how conservative media works, which is a trip in and of itself. But B, I started becoming obsessed with what is the left actually doing? Now, because I have a background in industrial organizational psychology, I did corporate trainings. I was in the HR world speaking at some of the biggest HR conferences in the country when diversity, equity, and inclusion training was on the rise. I remember being at the Society for Human Resources Management conference. I spoke at that conference every year for like 3 or 4 years in a row. This is a big, massive HR person conference. Like it's the largest HR conference in the world. There are tens of thousands of people that go to this thing. And I remember being at the SHRM conference. I'm pretty sure it was in Las Vegas that year. It may have been in Chicago. So I went to it in New Orleans, Chicago, Las Vegas, and I feel like somewhere else. I don't remember. I think it was the Las Vegas one. And in the exhibit hall, this must have been back in like 2018 or something, 2017, 2018. The exhibit hall was almost entirely taken over with diversity trainers. And this was new for SHRM. It wasn't always like that in HR. It was like diversity training just blew up all of a sudden. And so that was the space I came from before I came into politics. So when I got thrown into the conservative media sphere, and of course this was during COVID, so the world was weird anyway, I started just kind of really trying to figure out what is the far left actually doing when it comes to diversity training? Because again, I understand corporate training. And so what I started doing on my YouTube channel at the time was watching DEI trainings. Because if you go on to like university websites or a lot of corporate websites or a lot of trainer websites, they post the videos of the trainings that they're doing in the real world. And so you see all this clickbait content going around the internet of just like a 30-second clip of a DEI training or a whiteness lecture or something like that. I would actually go and find the whole video and watch the whole thing, because not only did I want to see, obviously the crazy stuff that makes us all laugh, I also wanted to see how are they actually teaching this shit in organizations and what are they doing? Because I was trying to reverse engineer it just because that's a world and a topic that I'm really interested in as an industrial organizational psychologist. It's so funny sometimes how I think about all of these little things in my life pushing me into the space I'm in now and being the thing that needed to set me up to do the work I'm doing today. The IO psychology stuff absolutely needed to happen for me to be the analyst that I am today of the far left. It's very similar in terms of analyzing how a group functions. So I was covering all this stuff on my YouTube channel. And again, all of this stuff is documented on my YouTube channel going back for years and years and years and years and years. So people can actually go back and, oh God, actually don't go back and watch the stuff I used to do. I'm sure it was so cringe. I don't even want to think about the stuff I used to do now, because I'm so much better at it now than I was then, because I was learning. I was learning live on the internet how to do this stuff, right? So I started covering all these diversity trainings just from organizations all over the country. And I just started watching this stuff kind of like all the time on my YouTube channel when I wasn't traveling and doing rallies and stuff with Walkaway, which I did a lot of in 2020. But getting into 2021, I was kind of sitting at home and I was working on like helping out with a couple anti-critical race theory bills that were happening at the time. And I was starting to kind of get involved in libertarian politics. But mostly what I was doing was I was watching these diversity trainings online to try to reverse engineer them. And it's like, once you go down the rabbit hole of starting to find these trainings, you start finding some of the craziest stuff. So in that time period, because I was doing all this stuff in public, people would reach out to me with stories and they would reach out to me with tips. So I was the person who broke the story about this, the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees. This was a big story back in, 2020? And this is the story that actually launched Christopher Rufo into the space. Christopher Rufo was the only journalist to pick up on my story that I broke. It was the first big story I ever broke about Seattle segregated training, and he picked up on it, and that's the reason he does what he does today. So I broke that story. I broke the Coke Be Less White story. If you've ever seen the story about Coca-Cola Be Less White in the training, that came from me. I broke that story. I started getting into watching trainings about what the schools were doing. And this is actually the really scary stuff. If you go back to the schools exposed days on my channel, we were actually watching teacher education trainings in addition to all this diversity training stuff. And so we started watching teacher education trainings and we started seeing, here's how the teachers are trained to teach critical race theory. Here's how the teachers are trained to teach gender ideology. We started being able to go in and do investigations on school websites to figure out what crazy shit the schools were teaching, and I uncovered some crazy stuff. I broke a big story about the Burlington, Vermont school district in which they were grooming children live on the internet. Did anyone see this? Do you guys remember this story from a couple years ago? Ben Shapiro covered it without crediting me. Laura Ingraham covered it without crediting me. They steal my content all the time. And I have that documented, by the way. You can find it on my website. Anyway, so I broke this story about the Burlington, Vermont school district doing this groomer gender training with 12-year-olds on the internet, and they put all the files up on their YouTube channel, and we watched those videos for some of my streams. How I've broken a lot of my news stories is I'm literally just watching content that's on the internet that no one else is looking at. And I'm sitting down and I'm watching the whole thing, so I'm getting all of the crazy bits. So I just kept doing this for years and years. I like basically all of 2021, I was doing diversity training and starting to get into the school stuff. In 2022, I was really into doing the school stuff, but we were also still just doing all this diversity training stuff. I've got a massive back catalog of all this content from leftist trainings that I was logging and breaking these news stories out of and things like that. Well, around mid-2022, I discovered socialism. I shouldn't say I discovered socialism, because I already knew a lot of this stuff came from the far left. The reason that I was one of the very first people screaming about the left, like we have to say capitalism when it comes to the left, is I was watching all these diversity trainings, and they were saying instead of saying they were against white people, they were saying they were against capitalism. And so I knew where all this stuff came from. It came from the far left. Well, by happenstance, in mid-2022, I was doing a weekly show on my YouTube channel with my friend Alex, and we called it Sassy Saturday because we were basically just watching other people's content and complaining about it on the internet and just having a fun time and letting our hair down and stuff like that. And so Alex had to stop doing the show because he had a job and that was requiring more of his time. And so Sassy Saturday got canceled. And it just so happened the week that Sassy Saturday got canceled, I happened to see the Socialism Conference in 2022 was streaming their sessions live on the internet. And I was like, there is a socialism conference. There is a literal conference called the Socialism Conference. And they're streaming their presentations live on the internet on Saturday. And I said to my audience, I was like, well, instead of Sassy Saturday, we can do Socialism Saturday, and we'll stream the Socialism Conference. And that was how Socialism Saturday was born. It was a joke. As most of my stuff tends to have a lot of dry humor in it, I don't know if you guys can tell. But part of what I'm trying to do with the left is I'm trying to satirize the left. I'm trying to mock them in a very dry humor way by appropriating their language and some of their ideas and just kind of making fun of their stuff in a really backhanded way. That is all intentional. That is part of my strategy, for better or worse. Anyway, so we started doing Socialism Saturday. And this is when the real obsession started. Because when I started watching real communists and real socialists, my mind exploded. And all I wanted to do after that was watch communists and socialists. Because I had seen all the mundane leftist stuff. I had seen all the boring leftist stuff that was shared on Twitter, the stuff that you see on Libs of TikTok or Fox News or Steven Crowder. You guys don't even know. That stuff is so boring to me. It's so mundane. It's it doesn't even register on my crazy scale anymore. And the reason it doesn't is because I have spent the last couple of years almost entirely engrossed in the radical revolutionary far left, and their content is so much crazier. And I became obsessed with watching it because you never knew what they were going to say next. And then as I was watching it, I started to learn how to break down their language because they speak a completely different language than us. Me and my audience, I have people that have been watching socialism with me for years and years and years. We learned how to pick apart their language to explain the word salad to normal people. We're not always perfect at it, but we're getting better at it all the time. There's no one on the internet teaching the language the way that you will learn it in my community because we've actually just spent so much time watching the left in their natural habitat. That is a very key part of what I do, by the way. The content that we watch about the left, it's not something that the left is putting out as a marketing video or a promotional video. It's stuff they're using to talk to each other. It's we're going inside a leftist meeting. We are a fly on the wall of a leftist meeting. We're seeing what they're doing in the real world. We are seeing what they talk about in the real world. We watch across a variety of groups. We do not just watch one group. We watch as many as we can find that are relevant in the space. This is how I know all the different groups involved, because we have watched all the different groups involved on this channel. And once you know where to look for their content, there's so much of it. There's more socialism than we can ever watch. And so a lot of my streams nowadays are research streams. That's what they are. And people complain, well, Karlyn, your content's too long, your content's too long. Okay, I get it. But you got to understand what I'm doing right now in order to teach people about the left is I'm using my streams to research their content, and we're doing live kind of dissections of their content. Listen, I'll try to be better about making clips. All right. Do me a favor. You guys go subscribe to my Substack, Karlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. I will get better at making clips. I do a pretty good job of it. I've got a ton of clips. All right. But like, I'll do a better job of breaking it down into shorter content, but you guys got to stop complaining about the length of the streams, because they are what they are. They are research streams. We do deep dives here. The reason my predictions about the left are so accurate is because I don't take the lowest hanging piece of fruit and just throw it out on Twitter for clickbait. I'm actually doing deep dives and deep analysis on every single thing that we watch. And we have fun doing it, and we joke and we make fun of them. But when you stumble upon those clips of the radical revolutionary far left that they're saying the craziest things that you've ever heard, that's when it really, like, that's the good stuff. That's what gets me excited. You know, it's funny. I was like, so if people didn't see my video from yesterday, I basically ended up getting a whole bunch of Antifa propaganda in Boston over the weekend. And we're going to talk about that a lot. But I was saying to my husband, like, when we were back at the hotel that night, I was like looking at all my Antifa propaganda, and I was like, Victor, this is so exciting to me. And he's like, Karlyn, like, you're more excited about this than you are about sex. I'm like, oh no. But he's not wrong. Like, I was like my husband was telling me, he's like, I saw your eyes light up when you saw some of those booths at the very, you were like, like getting all this stuff. And so my husband knows, he's a very secure man. He's fine with it. But like, it's that, like, that this stuff gets me excited. This stuff is like, it's just an intellectual obsession with me. I don't want to make it seem like fetishistic. I'm not getting off to her or anything. No one spread any rumors, but you know what I mean, though. It's like we all have those things. And so how did I get into covering the radical revolutionary far left? It was a complete accident that landed me in exactly the right place that I should be, because I very literally get to talk about the thing that I am legitimately obsessed with on the internet all the time. And I write about it and I break it down, and I'm writing books about it. And if I get to spend my time doing this all the time, and I do work an absurd amount of time on this, I study the far left like basically 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, something like that. It's a little obsessive, I know. But I love this. I genuinely love this. This is something I think it's interesting. I think it's necessary. I think it's insane that we find so much stuff that no one else is talking about. And I love teaching it to people, and I love bringing new people along into this little, ushering you into the dystopian world of my content platform. Welcome. So that's a little bit of my backstory, and that's how I got to doing this. And I don't know, chalk it up to a twist of fate, or the universe winking and saying, this is where you need to go now. And no matter how many times you try to quit, because there have been times I've wanted to quit. You can go back and find it on my channel. There have been times when I've been like, no one's interested in this. This is stupid. There's no market for this content. I don't know how I'm going to be able to keep doing this. Like, there have been really tough times, man. I'm not going to lie. And there have been times when I wanted to quit, but there was always a little voice in the back of my head saying, you can't quit, Karlyn. Just shut the fuck up and continue to do it. You are not going to quit. This is important. People need to see this. You're the only one doing this. Just cool it, relax, go have a beer or something, and then come back and continue working. So I've never been able to quit, even when I've really wanted to. And now you guys won't let me. Now my own audience won't let me, which is fine. I will keep going as long as you guys want me to, as long as you guys are able to support the work I'm doing, either by sharing it out, liking videos, commenting on videos, subscribing to videos, helping me keep out of this awful YouTube shadow ban. That would be pretty great. All right. Off I go to do more work. See you guys soon.